Good afternoon. My name is Steve Adcock and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Technology Industry Association, and I would like to welcome you to the Powering a Cleaner Australia presentation this afternoon. 3rd of August 1958, the world's first nuclear submarine, the Nautilus, sailed under the polar ice cap and over the North Pole, and I had to put that sentence together very carefully because otherwise it didn't make a lot of sense. And that's over 40 years ago. As a child who grew up in the 60s, I grew up with Walt Disney, and he had Tomorrowland, Disneyland, and Disney World had the Epcot Centre, the experimental prototype community of tomorrow. And all of those were, in Walt Disney's mind, powered by nuclear power. What happened between then and now, I don't actually know. It seemed to be a path that we were on. In 1973, which was my last year at high school, the school decided that we had to do community service on Friday afternoon, and the cadets appeared to spend way too much time marching and cleaning their shoes, and the scouts spent way too much time building rafts out of bits of wooden rope, and we had a branch of the State Emergency Services, which was in those days called the Civil Defence at my school, and so I thought I'd join that, except that the reconnaissance people had to go out in really rough terrain and dangerous circumstances. I didn't like that. And the rescue people, there was way too much blood and guts for me. So I got the job as the State Scientific Officer for the State Emergency Service in 1973. It was my job to plot nuclear fallout in the unhappy event that the Russians dropped a bomb down the GPO. The tragedy is that we always did the sums on a 1 megaton bomb, and they never had one that small. And the 1 megaton bomb would have taken out the building that I was doing the calculations in, so there were some basic flaws in it. But I did get to spend a fair bit of time studying nuclear power, what made it work, how big it was, and the issues around it. And I have always been a proponent of nuclear power, which hasn't always been a popular thing to be. We have two presenters today, Ben Hurd and Professor Barry Brook. Ben got to his position on this power by a very different route, which I'll let him talk about. But I think, from my point of view, this is an idea whose time has come. Ben is a director of Adelaide-based advisory firm Think Climate Consulting. He has a master's degree from Monash University in Corporate Environmental Sustainability, and he's a member of the Technology Industry Association Environmental and Sustainability Action Committee. I might point out that one of our meetings went rather longer than it should, as he showed off the baby photos of young Abigail. After several years with major consulting firms, Ben founded Think Climate and has since assisted a range of government, private and not-for-profit organisations to measure, manage and reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and move towards more sustainable operations. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ben Hurd.
Thanks, Steve, and thank you very much to the TIA for organising and sponsoring today's event and doing such a great job with it. And it's great to see so many people here turned on. A bit of a message there, Dave, if you could just agree to turn to the licence point.
Oh, sorry.
Just
Just say it. That's a good idea. Go ahead.
I pay for my software. No. So yes, thank you very much for coming to you. I have to say something on the subject of nuclear power, particularly in relation to climate change. If tomorrow Australia began formally the process of embarking on developing a nuclear power industry, I wouldn't be one of those on the sidelines wondering what took them so long. I'd know what took them so long. I did. Me and people like me. Well-meaning, no more or less intelligent than anyone else, Australians, who have, over a long period of time, made it extremely clear that we want absolutely nothing to do with nuclear power in this country. However, I've changed my mind, and I'd like to tell you why, and I'd like to tell you how, because I think it's critically important that we move this debate forward if we're going to have anything like a fighting chance of managing the impending climate and energy crisis. That's what I'm going to talk to you about today. Basically, what I'm going to ask you to do in this presentation is follow my train of thought, one long train of thought. Now, like any good train journey, it's got an origin, which was me as a nuclear opponent, and it has a destination, which is me as a nuclear proponent. But no good train journey would be complete without a few stops along the way. So you can hop on, hop off, depending on how you're feeling when we get there. But the first stop will be, how bad is the problem? And this is how I started my approach, understanding whether the problem was bad enough that I needed to think about nuclear power. The second thing I did was think about how good are the other solutions? Are they good enough to match the problem that I don't need to think about nuclear power? And then thirdly, I finally got to saying, well, can nuclear power help? And are the drawbacks of nuclear power acceptable to me? Now, I should say that this is a very personal journey, so I may not have asked all the questions that you would ask, and I may not have answered them in the way that you would choose to answer them. But I do hope that the way I've done it may provide you with some useful information and some useful insights on these issues. So I'd like to start by thinking first of all about how bad is the problem. Now, I'm a consultant, and as a consultant I'm almost constantly writing reports, and in most of those reports my clients will call for some sort of context on the scientific nature of the climate change problem. And the fact is, there's a lot I could say that I never do in my reports, not because I couldn't back them up with good information, because I know they'll never make it past committee. They'll never make it into the final, so I don't bother. And what those statements basically are is this: we can't know exactly what will happen this century. We can't. However, we are collectively staring down a very real risk, not certainty, but risk, of the end of civilization as we know it because of this climate crisis. We may be staring down a mass extinction from the creation of runaway climate change. And the response we have at the moment collectively assumes a level of luxury and time that we simply don't have. Now, you may think that those statements are pretty strong, and they are. I'd like to explain to you why I believe them to be true. Currently, atmospheric carbon dioxide levels are at 390 parts per million, as you can see from the Keeling curve on the right there. The current amount that we have is higher than any time in the last 450,000 years. In that period, we've seen 5 glacial interglacial cycles in our climate. The climate forcing that we're creating from that greenhouse gas is 10,000 times faster than the ordinary background level that would be there. So it's not so much the scale of what we're doing, but the speed of it through that climate forcing. And what we've learned more recently in science is that the ice sheets, contrary to prior belief, can respond very rapidly to this climate forcing. What we've experienced to date has already seen these types of responses: a very fast decline in Arctic ice sheets, a rapid disappearance of glaciers, loss of mass from Antarctica and Greenland, the poleward expansion of subtropical regions, damage to coral reefs and acidification of the ocean, and very worryingly, I think, melting of permafrost in Russia and Canada. So permafrost that ain't that perma, I guess you could say. And that's with about 0.7 degrees of warming experienced to date. Now, of course, climate change isn't happening in a vacuum. We also have to think about what's happening with our societies. And our population is forecast to reach 10 million people by 2050. The energy consumption is forecast to roughly double. You can fiddle with those figures a little bit if you like on different scenarios, but let's assume that the good people at PwC basically do their job quite well. And global policy response, this may seem a little short, but I've read enough of these flowery documents to start reading between the lines now and tell you that the policy response is basically this: that coal is to remain a major power source in our energy supplies. The next IPCC assessment, they're going to be running different scenarios, and the scenarios they're going to look at are considering 490, 650, 850 and 1370 parts per million, when we've got no record of ever being above about 350. All this basically assumes that it's okay to overshoot